This is going to blow your mind. Can world leaders truly cut emissions before it's too late? In just 10 minutes, we'll try to decode their plans, their promises, and their roadblocks. Let's see if there's any real hope, or if it's all just hot air. The stakes couldn't be higher. From soaring temperatures to record-breaking storms, the evidence of climate change is all around us. But while the science is crystal clear, the actions of those in power, not so much. Every year, leaders gather at these big climate conferences, promising big changes. They stand on grand stages, deliver impassioned speeches, and sign agreements that are meant to steer the world towards a more sustainable future. The media covers these events extensively, and for a moment it feels like the world is united in its fight against climate change. And yet, here we are, emissions still rising, temperatures still climbing. The glaciers continue to melt at alarming rates, and extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and severe. The promises made at these conferences often seem to evaporate as soon as the cameras are turned off. Why is meaningful action so difficult? The answer lies in the complex web of challenges that world leaders face. It's not just about making a decision, it's about navigating a labyrinth of competing interests and priorities. Imagine being a world leader, trying to balance the well-being of the planet against the pressures of politics, economics, and public opinion. Every decision is scrutinized, every move is analyzed. They have to consider the immediate needs of their citizens, the economic implications of their policies, and the long-term health of the planet. Pledging to cut emissions sounds simple enough, but it's like navigating a minefield. Each pledge comes with a host of challenges and potential pitfalls. Leaders have to weigh the benefits of reducing emissions against the potential backlash from industries and workers who might be affected. One wrong step could cost them their careers or even trigger an economic crisis. The stakes are incredibly high and the margin for error is slim. They have to make decisions that are not only environmentally sound but also economically viable and politically acceptable. It's not as straightforward as go green and everything's fine. Transitioning to renewable energy requires significant investment, technological innovation, and infrastructure development. It's a massive undertaking that involves rethinking entire industries and supply chains. There are jobs on the line, industries at stake, and entire economies that depend on fossil fuels. For many regions, fossil fuels are not just an energy source, they are the backbone of the local economy. Transitioning away from them means finding new ways to support these communities and ensure that workers are not left behind. Public opinion is another significant hurdle. Climate policies can be deeply polarizing, sparking debates and protests. Leaders have to navigate these social dynamics carefully, balancing the need for urgent action with the need to maintain public support. International cooperation is crucial but challenging. Different countries have different priorities, economic conditions, and levels of development. Reaching a consensus on global climate policies requires diplomacy, negotiation, and often compromise. Despite these challenges, there are reasons for hope. Innovative solutions are emerging, and communities around the world are taking action. Grassroots movements, technological advancements, and new economic models are paving the way for a more sustainable future. The road ahead is undoubtedly difficult, but with determination, collaboration, and a shared vision, meaningful progress is possible. World leaders have the power to drive change, but it will require courage, resilience, and a commitment to the greater good. Take, for example, the recent G20 summit. Leaders from the most powerful nations on Earth met to discuss climate change. They gathered with the world watching, hoping for decisive action. Did we get bold new commitments? Not exactly. The expectations were high, but the outcomes were underwhelming. Instead, we got a vague agreement to recognize the importance of keeping warming under 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's right, just a recognition. It was a statement of intent rather than a concrete plan. No legally binding targets, no enforcement. The agreements lack the teeth needed to ensure real progress. They acknowledge it's a problem. But does that really do anything? Acknowledgement without action is just lip service. And let's not forget about the COP conferences. These annual gatherings are meant to be the cornerstone of global climate action. Each year the stakes get higher, the rhetoric more intense. Leaders make passionate speeches and the urgency of the situation is highlighted. Yet, despite the pledges, there's always that same question. Who's actually holding these countries accountable? The lack of a robust accountability mechanism undermines the entire process. Many promises are voluntary, meaning leaders can backtrack whenever it's politically convenient. Net zero by 2050, it sounds impressive, but without binding commitments, it's just another promise. Great idea if they're still around to enforce it. The long-term nature of these goals means current leaders won't be held accountable for their success or failure. This isn't a new issue. For decades, leaders have been making promises at these summits. The history of climate agreements is littered with ambitious goals that were never met. Meanwhile, the planet continues to warm. The evidence is all around us: rising global temperatures, more frequent and severe natural disasters, and melting ice caps. The public, especially the younger generation, is demanding action. They're taking to the streets, organizing protests, and calling out leaders for their inaction. There are solutions available. Renewable energy projects like solar and wind power are becoming more viable and widespread. Electric vehicles are gaining popularity. The technology exists to make a difference. Some countries are leading the way, showing that it's possible to implement effective climate policies. These nations are proving that economic growth and environmental sustainability can go hand in hand. International cooperation is crucial. Climate change is a global issue that requires a global response. When countries work together, they can achieve much more than they can alone. Local communities also play a vital role. Grassroots initiatives and community-led projects can drive significant change from the ground up. Scientists and researchers are continually advancing our understanding of climate change. Their work is essential in guiding policy and action. Policymakers need to listen to the science and act accordingly. Legislation and regulations must be based on the best available evidence. There have been moments of hope. When leaders come together and commit to real action, progress is possible. But these moments need to become the norm, not the exception. The future depends on the actions we take today. It's time for leaders to move beyond words and take meaningful, enforceable action. The world is watching, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The reality of climate commitments is that they need to be more than just commitments. They need to be actions. The planet's future depends on it. Here's the reality check. Right now, CO2 levels are at 417 parts per million. This is a significant increase from pre-industrial levels, which were around 280 parts per million. The rapid rise in CO2 levels is primarily due to human activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. To avoid catastrophic climate impacts, we need to bring that down to 350. Achieving this target requires a global effort to transition to renewable energy sources, improve energy efficiency, and implement sustainable land use practices. It's not just about reducing emissions, it's about rethinking how we live and work, but we're headed in the opposite direction. Despite international agreements and pledges, CO2 emissions continue to rise. Deforestation, urbanization, and the increasing number of vehicles on the road contribute to this upward trend. If we don't change course, the consequences will be dire, and the consequences are terrifying. Rising sea levels threaten to submerge coastal cities, displacing millions of people. Uncontrollable wildfires are destroying vast areas of forest, releasing even more CO2 into the atmosphere. Extreme weather events, such as hurricanes and floods, are becoming more frequent and severe, causing widespread devastation. This isn't just a prediction, it's already happening. We are witnessing the impacts of climate change in real time. Flooded streets, raging wildfires, and severe storms are becoming the new normal. The time to act is now. We must take immediate and decisive action to reduce CO2 levels and mitigate the impacts of climate change for the sake of our planet and future generations. But there's hope, right? Some leaders seem genuinely committed. Countries like Denmark and Costa Rica have made impressive strides toward renewable energy, proving that change is possible. Innovations in green technology are also gaining momentum, from carbon capture to electric transportation. But are these efforts enough to counterbalance the inaction elsewhere? So here's the big question for you. Can these leaders really overcome the odds? Can they unite, set aside their differences, and tackle this crisis head-on, or are we just watching them put on a show while the planet burns? At the end of the day, change doesn't just happen because leaders make promises, it happens because people demand it. Breaking news, your voice matters now more than ever. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe world leaders can cut emissions in time, or are we simply too late? And if you want to see some cutting-edge solutions that could actually make a difference, stick around and check out our video on the top 5 climate technologies shaking up the game. Thanks for watching, and let's figure this out together.